Welcome to The Kill File, your favorite true crime podcast. I'm your host, Brittany, and each week we will explore the dark corners of true crime, unsolved mysteries, and murder. Join me as we uncover secrets, investigate evidence, and dive into the chilling details of some of the most fascinating cases. Get ready for a journey into the dark unknown, because in The Kill File, nothing stays buried forever. Hey guys, welcome to episode 5 of The Kill File. So today we're going to be talking about what has been referred to as the pizza bomber case. It's an interesting, twisted story. I had never heard of this one before. I hope that you guys enjoy it. The story is just bizarre. So trigger warnings for today. We're going to be talking about murder, rape, a bomb, and corpses. So let's jump in. So the date is August 28th, 2003. The place is Erie, Pennsylvania. A 46-year-old man named Brian Wells walked into a bank in Erie. He was armed with a modified shotgun that looked like a walking cane, and the man handed a note to the bank teller that demanded $250,000 in cash. A collar bomb was found fastened around Brian's neck, and the note, while long, basically said the bomb would go off if Brian didn't receive the money he asked for. Brian, who worked as a pizza delivery person, was carrying a bag stuffed with more than $8,000. He walked back out of the bank as calmly as he apparently walked in. So how does one walk anywhere calmly with a bomb around their neck? I am positive that I would have just pissed my pants at some point, or maybe probably passed out. Let's be honest. Brian, however, didn't make it very far from the bank before the police spotted his car, and Brian found himself surrounded by police. The scene that was about to play out was called, quote, strange, and would make international news in the following days, months, and even years. I can understand why, because when I researched this case, I had no idea what was about to happen, and I had not heard about this case before, so I didn't know how this was going to play out, and I was already hooked. A pizza delivery person with a bomb collar? Yikes. So there's a Netflix 4-part true crime documentary series that was called Evil Genius, the true story of America's most diabolical bank heist in 2018. I watched this documentary and it was a good one. It was extremely informative and interesting with twists and turns, so if you get a chance, you should check it out. So as Brian sat on the ground, surrounded by police, he begged for help as he was trying to explain how he had been forced by 3 different, quote, black men, and was told by these men to rob the bank and follow the instructions. As Brian was out of the car sitting on the ground, the police had walked up to him and they checked his shirt and they saw that there was a bomb and they heard the ticking. When they realized he really did have a bomb around his neck, they backed way up and they took cover behind the police cars, which is understandable, but it was sad to watch because they kind of just peeked down his shirt and then took off backwards. Brian stated that he had gone to deliver a pizza to the people, but instead they strapped this explosive collar onto him and ordered Brian to bring back $250,000. Can you imagine how awful? You're just doing your job, getting ready to deliver a pizza. You're probably wondering, how much are these people going to tip me? And surprise, you get strapped with a frickin' bomb and told to come back with an insurmountable amount of money. This poor guy. So as Brian was sitting on the ground surrounded by police, begging for his life, the device was around his neck and it started beeping louder and louder and faster, which made it known that he didn't have much time to live. News cameras had now shown up to the scene and were covering the story on live TV. The cameras were rolling when Brian could be heard saying, "I'm not lying. Did you call my boss?" He also said, "He pulled out a key and started a timer. I heard the thing click when he did it." Brian yelled out, "It's gonna go off." I myself was surprised at how non-hysterical Brian was when he was telling the police to help him. A few witnesses had said the same thing, actually, about him being super calm in later interviews. I mean, you could tell that he was a little bit urgent, but he wasn't screaming or crying or hysterical or anything. He was just pleading for anyone to help him. It was sad. You can see it too on some videos if you search for him, if you're interested to see the scene. Brian said, quote, "Why is no one trying to get this thing off me?" No one was approaching him to help him. The police stayed back as they waited for the bomb squad, which I can understand. If you don't know what you're doing when it comes to a bomb, not only are you running the risk of getting blown up just by walking closer to him, but you're also running the risk of setting the bomb off if you're unqualified and you try to tinker with it. The news reporters were gathered around watching as the police had come up to them and told them to back up so they don't potentially get hit with shrapnel. And within a few seconds, the bomb went off. It killed Brian Wells. The video was horrifying. His death was caught on live TV across many networks. It took nearly 20 minutes for the bomb squad to make their way to Brian. I don't know much about that sort of thing, but is 20 minutes a long time to wait on someone to come disarm this bomb? Because I felt like it was. Like, maybe it needs to be a thing that we have bomb squad people, on standby just in case, because 20 minutes just seems like a really long time. How long did they think that the timer was set for? I would imagine that hearing a tick would just be awful. It was said that you could tell the ticking was getting quicker and quicker, which poor Brian, that's just such an awful, messed up situation. The bomb squad said they believed he had stopped breathing just minutes before they had gotten to the scene. So I was curious if Brian just sat there and bled out, or how long he was alive after the bomb went off, but it wasn't known at all. The authorities found a note in Brian's car that was titled, quote, "Bomb Hostage." It had given Brian detailed instructions as to how he would need to rob the bank of $250,000. And then there was a scavenger hunt for Brian to find clues, keys, and codes that would allegedly let him unlock and free himself of the bomb. The bomb was said to contain locks and a dial lock as well. The police went to each next clue and collected all of the items that Brian was supposed to find. Here is where I was confused. Why would someone go through all of the trouble of putting this robbery together and making a bomb to then have Brian run around and find clues and find keys and codes to unlock himself? Why would this person not just have him bring back the money straight to them? Authorities theorized that what may have started as a bank robbery for money turned into a game. Which, made sense to me. After the police reenacted the instructions with the conditions that were exactly like the day Brian was killed, down to the smallest detail of even having the same weather, it was concluded that Brian would not have had enough time to get all the clues, find all the keys and codes, and unlock himself in time for the bomb to not go off, which is awful. There was also a note that was handed to the teller that was meant for the bank manager, and authorities had pointed out that it was not a simple note like most are. Most that are handed to the bank tellers are something like, "Give me all the money in the drawer," or something short like that. But all of the notes that they recovered were lengthy. They had rambled on, and authorities described them as dissertations. Can you imagine getting a note like that working at a bank? Like, I'm going to need you to read these 5 pages really quick and then give me the money, or I'm going to shoot you, or the bomb's going to go off, or whatever. Like, that's scary. All right, so this next part is brutal, so trigger warning. A man named Korak Timon, who was the deputy coroner on the case, had to make what he claimed to be the hardest decision of his life still to this day. He had to make the horrific choice to perform a surgical decapitation to the body of Brian Wells. Their biggest concern at this point was keeping people safe. There were warnings on the bomb itself and in the handwritten notes that said that the bomb was booby-trapped if it was tinkered with. So in their eyes, they had to take this very seriously and assume that the bomb could potentially go off again. I mean, they didn't know. Brian's sister gave a statement basically saying how upset they were that Brian's body was decapitated and that their mother was absolutely distraught knowing that Brian's body was not going to be in condition for them to have an open casket. His family felt that they were robbed of their chance to say goodbye with an open casket. They also said that they felt like more care was placed on preserving the bomb than there was with preserving Brian's body. I remember the sister saying that there was just tears streaming down their mother's face when she got the phone call that said Brian's body was not fit for viewing. She said they told her mother that the removed head could not be supported in position. They had said there was no way for him to have an open casket. So I'm going to say something it's probably a little bit morbid, and this is just my opinion, but I was wondering how come they couldn't figure out a way to make his head sit like it should, and maybe just like put a scarf or something around his neck. Like, I know they always put those pillows behind the body's head, and I get it because it's supposed to look peaceful and whatnot, but I just could not accept the fact that they could not come up with a way to give this family closure by allowing them to view his body. I feel like I would have been able to get creative with this for just that family's sake. I got stuck on this part for just way too long. On the documentary, you could tell that the deputy coroner's face, that it was not a decision that he took lightly and that it may still haunt him. He said he knew it wouldn't make much sense to say, but that the surgical decapitation was done with care. If they had thought that the bomb was going to go off after touching it in any way, they wanted to make sure that everyone was safe. And I know that it's sad to say, and I can understand their thought process, though, on this decision. It's just my opinion, but I get it, unfortunately. Brian's friends and co-workers were completely shocked when the robbery took place. They could not believe that he would have had anything to do with it. A report said that Brian lived in a modest house with his cats. His coworker said that it would also be so far out of his character and it would go against anything that Brian believed in to be a part of this. The police were questioning if he did help plan this. Why would he use a live bomb on himself? It just didn't make sense. They were just super confused about what happened. This was the first time that police had seen anything like this. They did search Brian's house for any evidence to see if he was involved, but they couldn't come up with any physical evidence linking him to this. In fact, they said that all they found were some phone numbers of some sex workers. Witnesses at the bank that day said Brian actually stood in line for a few minutes before walking in front of a bunch of people to hand the teller the note. He also grabbed a sucker from the basket while he was waiting for the money. This was caught on camera. It was said that he looked like Charlie Chapman as he was leaving the bank because he was swinging the walking cane gun that was loaded, by the way, and swinging around the bag of money, which was weird for people. One of the weird things that happened surrounding this case was Brian's coworker, Thomas Panetti. He was supposed to come into authorities for an interview, but he called to change the interview to Monday, and unfortunately, Thomas's Monday never came. He died of what was said to be either an accidental overdose or suicide. So this, on top of Brian's death, had really baffled the police. It was said that Bob Panetti was afraid that whoever killed Brian was going to come after him, and that could be the reason that he allegedly taken his own life. So this robbery case remained unsolved for 4 years. 4 years! That's nuts. How did it even go that long? What about the address where the pizza was supposed to be delivered? I was curious about that because, again, I had never heard this story. The FBI had even offered a $50,000 reward. So we're going to jump over for a minute to a man named Bill Rothstein and a case that was referred to on the documentary as, quote, the frozen body case. There was a 911 phone call that came from this man Rothstein, who had stated on the call that there was a frozen body in his freezer and that a woman named Marjorie Deal Armstrong had asked him to help her with the body and that she had asked him to put the frozen body through a wood chipper. Who is this frozen body, you may ask? Well, this was the frozen corpse of a man named James, aka Jim, Roden, who I will call Jim from now on. He was Marjorie's boyfriend. Rothstein told the 911 dispatcher that he could not bring himself to put the body into a wood chipper and decided to call the police instead. When police showed up at Rothstein's home, they found the frozen body and then found Marjorie on the premises and arrested her. Rothstein then had come down to the station to tell the tale of what had happened. He then brought police into the home of Marjorie, where he allegedly had helped her with the body of Jim after Marjorie had shot him. He showed police where the body was laying, how he had put the body in a tarp, wrapped him up, and took him to his own house. So once they were at Rothstein's house, he told police that he had cut up the rifle that she had allegedly used to kill Jim, and that Marjorie had put something dark on the windows to cover up where they were going to cut up Jim's body. I'm not sure why they didn't end up cutting his body up. They didn't say for whatever reason. Not that that's a bad thing, but the body ended up in Rothstein's freezer instead. While the police were at Rothstein's house, they asked him what had happened to his wrist. You can see this on the documentary. And Rothstein told them it was marks from a stupid attempt at suicide. The police found Rothstein's suicide note at his house that stated it had nothing to do with the Brian Wells case, even though his house is right in front of where the pizzas were allegedly delivered. On the documentary, they showed that there was a little dirt road right next to Rothstein's house on Peach Street that had led to a radio tower. So the radio tower is where the pizzas were supposed to be delivered, but in his suicide note, he said that none of it had to do with the Brian Wells case. So the police knew instantly when they got the call that it was going to be tied somehow. It was figured out that the real motive behind Marjorie killing Jim was because Jim had known about the plot for the robbery and had threatened to go to the authorities. I wish I had more context for this because in my head I was curious, like, was this a fight and he threatened to go to the police? Was this just something that he had told her if she went through with it, that like he would rat on her? Because I am by no means victim shaming Jim. This was not his fault by any means. No one deserves what happened to him at all. I just wanted to share with you guys, my listeners, that this is something that has always terrified me. I've always been worried that if I get into a situation like this where I know something I shouldn't, or I didn't agree with what someone was doing, in my head, I always run the scenario where I would just always try to pretend that I'm fine with whatever's going down. And then as soon as I was able to slip away, I would just run to the police. Again, not shaming Jim. It's just so sad that he lost his life trying to do the right thing. It was just super unnecessary. Rothstein was out on bail during this time that he was showing the police both houses and explaining the situation because he had cooperated fully with the police. He was allowed out on bail. Not long after all of this went down, Rothstein fell ill and was in the hospital with terminal cancer, which no one knows if he knew the whole time that he had terminal cancer or if it was a surprise to him. But either way, he died shortly after. So who is this Marjorie person? Marjorie Diehl Armstrong was at this time a 58-year-old woman who was said to be extremely intelligent, manipulative, and had been absolutely beautiful in her youth. When she was young, it was said that she was never, quote, described as normal. She was said to be awkward and lonely and that the kids around her wanted nothing to do with her. Until her parents had built her a life-sized dollhouse, and this is something that brought kids to her house and she would get to play with them. When she was younger, she sought out a psychiatrist, and when she went in, she said that she was sad at her inability to have close relationships. She saw multiple mental health experts, and one of the diagnoses that she received was that she was not mentally ill, but rather a narcissist and had a personality disorder. I was a little confused by this. I didn't understand the difference between being mentally ill and having a personality disorder, so I did a little research. In an article in Psychology Today, it stated that a mental illness is considered to cause impaired thinking and that their behavior is without much personal control. On the other hand, a personality disorder is something that is usually seen as someone who has control over their own behavior, which can, quote, frustrate family and friends. The article went on to say that court cases have shown how people with personality disorders are still considered liable for their behavior more than those people with mental illnesses. So she was definitely aware that there was something going on within herself that just didn't seem right. She stated on the documentary that she knew that she was mentally ill, but that she was not stupid, and in fact repeatedly said that she was very intelligent. Marjorie had a bachelor's degree in sociology and a master's degree in education, so yeah, she was no dummy. Thank God she wasn't a teacher, though. When Marjorie was arrested in connection to the frozen body case, aka Jim Roden's case, it was found that this was not the first time a man had died around Marjorie. Far from it. In fact, Marjorie was acquitted for killing an earlier boyfriend named Robert Thomas. She was also married once back in 1992 to a man named Richard Armstrong, where one source said that he died from a brain hemorrhage and another source said that he had fallen into a coffee table. It then said that Marjorie sued the hospital that had treated her husband and was awarded some amount of money. I tried to find out more information on that, but I couldn't find anything. It was also said that one of Marjorie's ex-boyfriends had actually committed suicide by hanging himself. I don't know what's happening over there, but bodies are just stacking up around this woman. Writers and directors of the documentary were said to have done countless interviews with Marjorie. She was said to be a woman who had left a, quote, string of dead men behind her, and whom prosecutors have described as one of the plot's masterminds, end quote. And when they refer to plot, I believe that they're referring to the robbery. So the whole time that Marjorie was in jail, and the whole time Marjorie maintained that she had nothing to do with the crime. So let's talk about the bomb for a minute. The bomb itself was said to be sophisticated, but it also had some fake parts to it to try and confuse and trick people who tried to disarm it. The collar was said to be basically a giant handcuff, and once it was clicked, it couldn't come off. The fake pieces to the bomb included extra wires meant to be confusing, and there was also a cell phone built into it that, upon further inspection from the bomb experts, it didn't actually do anything. Again, these were just a decoy to throw people off. There were stickers also on the bomb that had deceptive warnings about the bomb being booby-trapped. On the back of the bomb, there was some scoring across the entire back plate that was supposed to act as what experts believed to be shrapnel when the bomb went off, but didn't work as it was intended. They said that the scoring wasn't deep enough, so it basically just blew open a hole, but it did not shrapnel like it was supposed to. When it came down to it, this bomb was just 2 pipe bombs set off with 2 egg timers. One timer that was set to go off, and if a key had been put into the correct keyhole, it would have given Brian more time. There were 4 keyholes on the bomb, but only 2 of them were real. So now let's talk about another key player in this story, a man named Kenneth Barnes. Ken was a friend of Marjorie, who was said to be a TV repairman, but was also a drug dealer and secretly ran a crack house as well. Ken was brought into the picture when him and Marjorie were hanging out one day, and Marjorie was explaining to Ken that she was pissed off because her father she had just found out that her father, who had like a savings of around $1 million, was helping out friends and neighbors by giving them money for large purchases like cars, and she felt like he was giving away her inheritance because she was the only child. And what Ken said was an offhand conversation. She had casually mentioned Ken being paid to kill her father so she could inherit the money. While Ken was giving an interview, he stated that he never had intentions to kill anyone, but that he was just going along with it so he could make some money. However, when Marjorie asked him how much that would cost her, Ken replied with $250,000. This was motive for Marjorie to plan the bank robbery. Poor Marjorie's dad, Harold Deal, on the documentary, he just seemed to be a sweet old man and said if he wasn't helping people, then he just didn't know what to do with himself. He seemed to enjoy helping people with the money that he had saved, and when he found out that she wanted to kill him, he took her off his will, and he kind of chuckled about it on the documentary, and he said that Marjorie may not have known that. It was said about a month before the robbery took place, Marjorie asked Ken if he knew how to build bombs. This is about the time that Marjorie starts to blame the death of her boyfriend, Jim Roden, on Rothstein, her friend that helped her with the body. She claimed that Rothstein wanted to be with her, but that she wanted to continue to date Jim, so she claimed that he could have gotten rid of Jim so that he was out of the way so Marjorie would date him. At this point, even when the interviewer was asking about the bank robbery, she still claimed to have nothing to do with it. She did, however, tell her lawyer she believed that Rothstein had built the bombs and was the mastermind behind the whole robbery, stating that he often bragged about knowing how to build bombs. She said it was one of the reasons that they cut off their engagement. But when women inside the prison had talked to Marjorie, they sang a different tune. They claimed that Marjorie had boasted that she had killed 2 boyfriends and gotten away with it. The women came forward as witnesses, and they actually ended up testifying about this. And they said that while she was talking about the killings, she showed no remorse for killing either of the men, and she was actually seeming to be proud of the fact that she had gotten away with it. She also said she thought she was going to outsmart law enforcement. One woman had come forward stating that she actually wrote notes down as Marjorie was talking, like right in front of her. And she had pages and pages of notes for the FBI, which ended up sitting in a desk drawer at a local police station for a long time. One of the women states that as Marjorie was talking about measuring Brian's neck for the bomb collar, she had said it was like no big deal and even laughed about it. In the notes that one of the women had given to the authorities, there were many key parts to the investigations that came from this. She noted that a man named Floyd Stockton, who was Rothstein's roommate at the time, who was actually already cleared by the FBI, was definitely involved, but we will talk about him later on. When asked about these witnesses, Marjorie always said she had some reason or some story about how all of these women were liars and she didn't do anything. Finally, Marjorie pled guilty, but also mentally ill, to third-degree murder, and she insisted that she was not responsible, but that she just wanted to avoid getting a longer sentence, so that's why she apparently or allegedly had killed Jim. After many years, the Brian Wells case was still the subject of debate as to whether Brian was involved or not. Some people pointed out the fact that he could have tried to get help right away instead of robbing the bank first, which is valid. But unless you're the one with the bomb on you, I feel like it's kind of unfair to point fingers. I mean, if he was not involved at all, maybe he just thought it would be faster to grab the money and get the hell out of there. Maybe he didn't know how detailed the instructions were going to be about like the codes and the keys and stuff. Or maybe they just slapped the bomb on and handed them the instructions and they were like, go. Like, I can imagine that you would just try to do whatever the instructions say so you can get the damn bomb off your neck, or at least that's what I would think. But the question still remained, was Brian really a victim? Who were the other people that were involved? And of course, what was the real goal of this entire thing? Before we answer that, there is one last key player that we need to talk about. Okay, so far we have Marjorie, the alleged mastermind behind the robbery plan, Rothstein, another alleged mastermind behind the plan, and Ken, who was somehow involved, but we weren't exactly sure yet how. The last key player in this story is a sick one. This man's name was Floyd Stockton, former roommate to Bill Rothstein. This sick fucker was already in prison for committing sexual assault or rape on a disabled teenager. Yeah, I already hate this guy. Stockton, when he was interviewed later on, had confessed to helping with the crime. He stated that he was trying to help make the pieces for the bomb, but that he had done it wrong, and Rothstein didn't want to use the pieces, so he just made the entire thing himself. Stockton confessed and was willing to cooperate with the police in return for immunity and for his part in the Brian Wells case, and he also got his sentence from the rape case cut in half. In half. That makes me sick. I do not like it when they do this to these types of crimes. Like, I can understand that I get it that they need to get information from people and they need to offer them something, but I feel like immunity and maybe a few years off or parole a little bit sooner would have been something that made more sense. But instead, he was getting his sentence cut in half, which to me, in my opinion, is just a big slap in that poor girl's family's face and hers. So here's a quick timeline of what happened according to the FBI archives. So August 27th, 2003, allegedly Marjorie, Ken, Floyd, and Rothstein had met so they could discuss the next day's robbery plot. It was said by a witness that they had seen Brian leaving the house that this took place at, which made a lot of people believe that he was part of the meeting and knew what was going on. However, his family and others were convinced that he was only there to deliver a pizza. On August 28th, 2003, 1:30 p.m., conspirators had used a payphone so they could order 2 pizzas that needed to be delivered to a remote tower, which just happened to be next door to one of the co-conspirators' house, and Brian would be the one who delivered the pizzas. At around 2 p.m. that day, the co-conspirators placed the bomb around Brian's neck. 2:20 p.m. is when Brian entered the bank and gave the teller the note demanding the money. It took about 12 minutes, and then Brian walked out with $8,702. The co-conspirators were a little distance away, but they were actually able to watch the plan unfold until Brian was stopped by the police, and that's when they fled. So in 2005, this is now 2 years after the robbery and murder had taken place, news outlets and a few TV shows came out to Erie to cover the story again, and they actually ended up uncovering a few clues themselves. It came out that there was a man named Professor Sedgwick who had been driving the day of the robbery down the highway when he saw a little gold car driving right at him. He said the gold car got closer to him and he could see the woman driving, and he had locked eyes with her and said that she had very unique eyes, and it was a moment that he was never going to forget. Apparently, this man reached out to the authorities multiple times, but no one talked to him, and he was never interviewed until the Geraldo show was there and had authorities on camera, and they asked in front of everybody if the authorities had talked to this man. The authorities at this point said they were going to interview him. When Marjorie was confronted with this bit of information, she was unable to deny that she was driving that day because there was a witness, but of course she just brushed it off as though she was just out and about that day and doing some shopping. After this story was told on an episode of FBI's Most Wanted, a man that had been watching the show was about to blow this entire case wide open. After this man and his son had watched the episode of FBI's Most Wanted, the son turned to his father and said, "You have to call the police and tell them." Apparently, this man had drove by the gas station on the day of the robbery and not long before it happened. He said he had noticed a man and a woman that were huddled around the payphone, which the authorities already knew that at this gas station, it was the payphone that had been used to call in the pizza delivery. He remembered the woman looking at him and their eyes met. And he distinctly remembered the man because the tall man was wearing overalls, and the man had said to himself, like, "Nice bibs," because it was a hot day out. After seeing the episode, he then realized the woman and the man that he saw was none other than Marjorie and Rothstein. Yes. He directly called the FBI, and he wanted to share what he had seen. Marjorie, of course, had a reason to be at the gas station, and of course, she said that Rothstein had put her up to it, that it was planned for her to be there, almost like he wanted her to get caught, but that she still had no idea what was going on. While in prison, a woman named Jennifer Brenninger stated that Marjorie had told her while incarcerated that she wanted all of the co-conspirators to be dead. Ken finally stated that he wanted to tell the truth. He told interviewers that Brian was not involved. He had told Stockton to grab Brian when he had showed up with the pizzas and was waiting to get paid. After Stockton grabbed him, Ken said that Brian was trying to get away and he was upset. Ken said that he kind of smacked Brian in the face and said, quote, "Don't be a puss." At this time, Rothstein grabbed a gun, he shot it into the air, and he told Brian, "You're not going anywhere." Then Stockton and Marjorie put the bomb around his neck. They handed him the walking cane and told him to use it if he got into any trouble. And they also told him that if he was caught by police, to tell them that a few black men had held him down and put this on him so that the police would be off their trail and it wouldn't lead back to the group, which super made me mad. Why does it have to be 3 black men? That pissed me off. It was awful. Awful. It was thought that the reason that the group of co-conspirators were saying that Brian was involved in the first place was that no murder charge could be brought against any of them if Brian was involved. However, if he wasn't involved, then some, if not all of them, could be charged with murder, which is so awful. And, you know, the cops pointed something out and they were right. They were saying whether Brian was involved or not, this was still murder. And they're right. It was still murder. A witness had seen Brian at that house the day before, and the group used this to say that they had a meeting the day before to go over the plans for the next day, but Brian's family said that he was probably just there to deliver pizza. There was no evidence that he was involved. In fact, Ken also stated that Brian did not know what was going to happen that day, that he really was just there to deliver the pizzas, not knowing what was about to happen. Ken pled guilty in September of 2008 to conspiracy to commit armed robbery and to using a, quote, destructive device in a crime of violence. He was then sentenced to serve 45 years in a federal prison in December of 2008 for his participation in the incident. Kenneth also was able to get a judge to have his sentence by testifying against Marjorie at her trial. During Marjorie's trial, there were many who testified against her. Floyd Stockton was supposed to be one of these people, but he was actually unable to testify because he had to have heart surgery. He was ill. During Ken's testimony at Marjorie's trial, she yelled that he was a liar. At her trial, one of Brian's friends and his favorite sex worker named Jessica Hoopsick had testified that she had been at the house and had overheard something about a bank robbery, but that she didn't know who was talking or what was exactly said. After her testimony, she ran out of the courtroom, having never looked at Marjorie in the face. Because of this, the interviewer for the documentary caught up to her as she was leaving and asked if she could do an interview, to which she said no. Later on, she called the interviewer to schedule to do an interview with him, but when the time came, she was a no-show, which was strange. The documentary interview had developed some kind of a relationship while speaking to Marjorie. In fact, she had asked him to be at her hearing, and he did go. When he was there, he was actually sitting on the prosecution side, behind the bench of the prosecution. And when she saw him there, she was like, "What the hell are you doing over there? You're on the wrong side. Get over here," which he did. Anyways, when she finally spoke a little bit about the robbery to the interviewer, he said that he believed that Brian was innocent and that he had nothing to do with the robbery. To which Marjorie was pissed and asked why he would believe this, and then said, quote, "It's not like we didn't measure his neck for the collar." I don't know how true this was, or if she was just offended that the interviewer didn't believe her, but that is what she said. Marjorie was found guilty in November of 2010 of conspiracy, using a destructive device in a crime of violence, and armed bank robbery. On February 28, 2011, she had received a sentence of life plus 30 years. In a major twist at the end of the documentary, Brian's favorite sex worker and friend, Jessica Hoopsick, finally agreed to do an interview and stated that Brian was innocent and that he was actually a good guy. She was crying during her interview, and she said that she was just so sad that she could do something like this to somebody that she liked, which I was like, what do you mean? So she said that Rothstein had approached her and asked her for help finding a quote-unquote gopher to rob the bank, and he offered Jessica $5,000, to which she asked if she could have some of the money right then if she gave him a name. And Rothstein said he didn't have the money yet, but that he could give her drugs, to which she agreed. Of course she did. She brought Brian to Rothstein's house, and what's worse is she actually gave the group Brian's work schedule so they could make sure that the day that they robbed the bank and set this whole thing up, Brian would be the one who brought in the pizzas. Awful. So where are they now? Stockton's ex-wife stated her reaction to Stockton dying on August 10th, 2022 by saying, quote, "He was an evil, sick rapist, abuser, and a murderer who got enjoyment showing power over other people. I shed no tears but find peace in his death," end quote. Ken was serving his sentence at the Federal Medical Center at Butner in North Carolina near Raleigh, where he had remained until his death on June 20th, 2019. One report said that Kenneth died of cancer. It actually said that he died of a small cell lung cancer that had apparently spread to his brain. This was just according to his death records. Marjorie died from breast cancer while she was incarcerated on April 4th, 2017. And up until her death, she still insisted that she was innocent. And that, my friends, is the story of the pizza bombing case. Yeah, this one was gnarly, and the documentary was really good. If you have a chance to check it out, you should. This story was just so interesting to me because I had never heard of it. I was curious the entire time I was watching everything and reading everything, like, was Brian involved? Was he not involved? Because the fact that that Jessica girl brought him to the house doesn't necessarily mean that he was involved. Like, maybe she was just like, hey, this is just my opinion. Maybe she was just like, hey, I have some friends I want you to meet. Like, come on over and hang out with us. And then she gave him the schedules, and that's who they were going to use. Or maybe he knew about it and then, decided that he didn't want to do this, because one of the articles I read said that he might have been involved, and then when he realized that the bomb was real and it wasn't fake like it was supposed to be, that's when he was trying to escape and get out of there. So I'm a little bit confused as to why he was so nonchalant in the bank. Maybe he didn't really think it was a real bomb. Maybe he just thought they were trying to scare him. I don't know, but I can't imagine sitting there on the ground with that ticking noise getting louder and faster, and holy crap, like I feel like I would have just jumped up and started running, because if the bomb's gonna go off anyways, like, I don't know, I guess the cops probably would have shot him, but I don't know, I feel like the bomb's gonna go off anyways, like, why not try to take it off? I don't know, I guess they couldn't since it was a giant handcuff. It's just, this whole story was so sad, and it just made no sense to me if it was really all about the money. They said that Rothstein had lived in the house that his father had given him, I think when his father had died, and his siblings were tired of him living there rent-free and they needed some money, so they wanted to sell the house and then split the money 3 ways. So Rothstein lied to them and told them that he put it up for sale for $90,000, and that's why he needed some of that bank money, because he was going to pay off his brother and sister so he could keep the house and live there for free. And the houses, when you see this, it's like an episode of Hoarder. It's awful. They're both just absolutely disgusting, and they didn't take care of anything, and it just kind of painted this whole picture of these people who probably were wrapped up in drugs. I mean, if Ken was a drug dealer and he ran a crack house, my guess is that he just was all kinds of messed up on drugs, and that's probably why he went along with it. He was like any kind of mastermind, and he was just kind of following suit. So I just imagine that drugs were involved. Anyways, I'm gonna post a picture on the Kill Files socials of all of these players that are involved. I want you guys to take a look at Marjorie. If you get a chance, you should look her up when she was younger. She absolutely was beautiful, but she does have these creepy ass eyes. Like, I can't even, people were describing them over and over as like she looked through you. Like, these are one of those things that I was wondering, like, is she one of those people that has those dead eyes that like they can do anything, they can switch it on and off? I can tell you right now that watching the interviews with her, that she just thought she was the smartest thing in the whole wide world, and she was convincing to people that she wasn't at guilt for any of it. But I could tell, I've met people like her before, she's super full of shit. Like, she's one of those people that has an answer for everything, but she doesn't necessarily think the answer through first, she just blurts it out. Because some of the answers you're like, what? That makes no sense. Like, why would Rothstein have her standing at the gas station? Like, what? I mean, if he asked you to be there, because she kind of made it seem like he plotted her to be there so she'd get caught, but what? He was like, go to the gas station and use the phone? Or like, because usually when you're at a gas station, you're getting gas or you're getting a snack or a drink or whatever. You're not standing at the payphone with the person. Like, there was an eyewitness. So stuff like that where she would just blurt it out when she got caught, and it was just like, you are so full of shit. Anyways, I'm gonna post the pictures. Let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys next time. Bye. Well, that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today and listening to another episode of The Kill File. If you want to share your thoughts on what we covered today, suggest a case for me to check out, or if you're just bored and looking for something to do, you can head over to The Kill File's social medias and reach out. We're on Facebook and Instagram as The Kill File, and we're on YouTube and TikTok as The Kill File Podcast. Also, feel free to check out our website at thekillfile.com, where you can learn more about me, your host, and a little bit more about how The Kill File got started. I love hearing from you guys. Come back on Mondays, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, when we will cover another case on The Kill File, where nothing stays buried forever. Stay safe, you guys. Bye!